What's up, Pineapple Nation? It's your boy Manny here. Welcome to another edition of the Report, the NAIA Women's Basketball Podcast, episode 41. As we get another weekend in the books and another weekend full of upsets, we're going to touch on the key ones. We'll touch on briefly just kind of a few other ones that probably went under the radar, but I do think it'll be very important and should be noticed or at least brought to light. And then, of course, we're going to do our top 25 receiving votes predictions with the polls coming out, the first polls of 2026 coming out this Wednesday. That's actually where we're going to start. So a little segment of kind of call out, but it's going to be top 25 focused, obviously, with predictions that I believe might happen, that I believe could happen. So we're going to go right into it and dive into it. Top 25 recap. The last 25s that were in 2025: Bethel, Dordt, Campbellsville, Dakota State, Marion, Freed-Hardeman, St. Francis, Rio Grande, Concordia, Dakota Wesleyan, Mid-American Nazarene, Cumberlands, and Briarcliff for your top 13. And then the next were 14, Montana Tech, LC State, St. Francis, Rocky Mountain, Corbin, Langston, Huntington, Oregon Tech, Indiana Tech, MACU, Carroll, and Georgetown rounded out the 25 top teams. We're going to go through all the top 25, then we'll do the receiving votes at the end. First one, kind of could be a hot take if you really wanted to call it that. I think Freed-Hardeman becomes the number one team in the country, y'all. I really do. Obviously, Bethel lost to UT Southern last week. That's going to knock them off the number one spot immediately. Dordt and Campbellsville have already lost this season. Granted, for Campbellsville, they did lose to a ranked opponent in Dakota Wesleyan, so it shouldn't hurt them or anything like that, but they already have one loss. And I do believe with only two teams left now undefeated in the country, you got to reward one of them. You should reward both of them, and we'll get to that in a moment here. But like I said, Dordt, Campbellsville, you already lost, so I do think that's going to play a factor into this. For Dakota State, you lost twice over the past few days to teams not in the top 10, Carroll and Rocky Mountain. And then for Marion, I think they would have been the number one team in the country, especially after the Bethel loss. But you lose to St. Francis. Not a bad loss, but you did lose to a ranked opponent. So now I think the highest they can move up is maybe 2. Freed-Hardeman, again, one of the last two teams that left undefeated. They're already 2-0 in the Mid-South in conference play, which obviously I've gone on record saying is the best conference in women's basketball in the NAIA. And they're a top 10 offense in the country. Like they just check out too many boxes right now, playing a very tough schedule. I think the Tigers should be number one in the country, and I think they're going to end up being that. In the Lions, excuse me. After that, I think it rounds out Dordt, Campbellsville, Marion in the top 3 in that order. So I would probably go Dordt, Campbellsville, and Marion at 2, 3, 4. I could see Marion going up a little bit, but we'll see how they play that loss. But I do think those are the top 4 teams in the country right now. For Campbellsville, Marion, it's the fact that it's a toss-up. I could see them going up to number 3, but the Tigers, their loss was on a neutral site, while the Knights' loss was at home. But then you flip it, and the Knights lost to a higher-ranked team in St. Francis than Dakota Wesleyan, which is, again, who the Tigers from Campbellsville lost to. So there's pros and cons to both losses, if you want to call it that. So we'll see where the committee leans towards when it comes to the rankings. Dakota State, they may fall outside of the top 10 or really close to it, just because at least falling down 2 spots of Freed-Hardeman, St. Francis, Dakota Wesleyan, Rio Grande. I think all of those, two of those should jump Dakota State. 2 of those should have been, for reference, Dakota State was 4, Freed-Hardeman was 6, St. Francis was 7, Rio Grande was 8, and then Dakota Wesleyan was 10. All right, so I do think those 4 teams, 2 of them are going to jump Dakota State. How many more after that is the question that we'll see answered on Wednesday morning. St. Francis is perfect, and that includes 3 impressive wins now over Taylor, over Marion, and over Rochester Christian. Is Rochester Christian ranked? No, but they, on their own right, have a win over Carroll. They have another win over Indiana Tech. Mind you, that is teams that St. Francis have also played, and there's also a Carroll team that Dakota State played and lost against. So I think that all those type of things are going to fall into factor here. So that's why I think St. Francis has a really good case of jumping Dakota State. Then Rio Grande, you've been perfect, including wins over Shawnee State and Spring Arbor, plus a Pikeville win that I don't think should go unnoticed. So you've got a lot of check marks in that department. Plus, Dakota Wesleyan, you're on the rise, in my opinion. They're 6-0 in the past few weeks, including wins over Providence and handing Campbellsville their first loss of the season in blowout fashion, almost a 30 piece. It's got to be a jump for sure. Like, that's why I say at least 2, could be more. I just made a case there for 3 of the teams, and the other one being Freed-Hardeman. So there's a world where it could be more than 2, but I think at least 2 is a safe assumption to make for jumping Dakota State and kind of putting them on the bubble of being outside the top 10. The only other question in the top 10 now is Concordia. Concordia has one loss since the last polls to Campbellsville, but you beat Providence on the road and Briarcliff. I see Concordia going to 10, maybe staying at 9. We'll see. But they're the only other question I have. And it's not so much a question of, like, do they deserve to be in there? Because that's not the case. It's just a question of, when you look at the teams around you in the top 10, there was a lot of movement one way or another, or a lot of teams already were pretty comfortable where they were at. So we'll see how the committee goes with Concordia. They may just stay there just because, like I said, there's too much movement around. So you got to have one team fill out that last spot, or that 9th or 10th spot. And I think they're going to fall into that category. Mid-American Nazarene, my first team outside the top 10. They may stay at 11. No major upgrades, but did what they were supposed to do in these past few weeks since the last polls. For Cumberlands of Kentucky and Briarcliff, there may be a little bit of a dip. Cumberland started 0-2 in conference play. Both losses were to Bethel and Fried Hardman, though, so you can't really hold that too much against them, but losses are losses. But the teams blow them out and did it, like I said, it wasn't too much to help them. And I think that's why there might be a little bit of a dip. It wasn't like the team that they beat could really, soften the blow of those two losses. Obviously, if you get one of those or both those losses, it's just a different story, but that wasn't the case. And then we've also got Briarcliff, like I mentioned. They were fine. I mean, the loss of Concordia wasn't a bad loss. 2-1 in the past few weeks, but no major win. So another one where just circumstantial, they might be fluctuating a little bit here on the downside of things. For Montana Tech, they're going to rise a spot or two, maybe 2, especially after extending their winning streak now to 9 in a row and getting a win over Providence. I don't see Montana Tech not going up. Again, they were number 14. I think they could go up, especially, like I said, with Cumberlands and Briarcliff on the bubble of dropping. I think they could go up to 12, as high as 12. LC State, they had a chance to get back in the top 10. I'm not going to lie with y'all. If they had beat Oregon Tech, I think I would have said, hey, put that team back in the top 10. But beating Southern Oregon and Corbin, still really good. That Oregon Tech game, it hurts just because the way it ended. And I do think that has to play a factor into it. I do think you have to look at that and say, hey, it was literally a last second, not because it was a clean shot. So not necessarily saying it was a lucky shot, but it was a heartbreaking loss the way that LC State did lose that one. So I think that should be taken into account a little bit. So now you've got Southern Oregon win, Corbin win, and you almost beat Oregon Tech. I think you have a good case of being up there, especially with Montana Tech going up a spot. I think LC State can go up a spot. I think LC State had a better 3 or so weeks since the last polls than a Cumberland and a Briarcliff, in my opinion. Now we go to St. Francis. St. Francis of Illinois, obviously, they lost. They had their first loss of the season, especially losing to an unranked team in IU South Bend. Nothing against IU South Bend. Great win for them. I got them dropping at least 3 spots, maybe. I mean, I'm looking at Rocky Mountain, Langston, and Indiana Tech, and I'll get to each one of those in a minute here, but I do believe St. Francis will be falling. I just don't know how far down. 3 seems a reasonable number, in my opinion. For Rocky Mountain, you're 5-2 since the last polls now, and especially with that Benedictine loss. It's not a good look, but beating Dakota State, I do think should overcompensate for that loss. Not saying that it should help you go up, but given the fact that you were 17 and it's above you, being St. Francis lost to an unranked team, I do believe. And then while both teams technically lost to unranked teams, you then get a ranked win, a very big ranked win in your book. That bumps you up that 1 spot. So now we're down to St. Francis being at number 17. For Langston, they've been boring, but in a great way. Like, you want to be boring sometimes throughout the season. And what I mean by that is nothing really helped them. They didn't beat any ranked teams and receiving votes teams, but nothing hurt them either. They did what they were supposed to do, and you got to credit that sometimes. So I do believe that the committee will do that. Sometimes the committee should reward teams for being boring and just doing what you're supposed to do. So I think that bumps them up over St. Francis, for example. Now you're at St. Francis being down to number 18. Then Indiana Tech, sneaky rise team, very sneaky. All right, they did lose to Taylor, but we've seen Taylor be a little bit better of a team than years past. So I don't think that should really hinder them too much. That's why I see them maybe sneaking up, because there's a lot of teams around them, and I'll get to in a moment here, that could be, because of the weeks that they had, on the downside. One of those teams being Corbin. I do think Corbin's going to they've hit their first wall of the season after going 4-2 in their last 6 games. They lost to Southern Oregon, who was receiving votes. They lost to LC State, but they were and still are above them. So we'll see how that kind of plays out. I can see Corbin falling a little. Maybe maybe a sneaky team to stay put, but I don't think so. I think the committee, you got to drop them a little bit. They're on the bubble of being a stay put team, but I wouldn't lean that way. I think they should fall at least one spot with Langston being a team that was right below them doing what they're supposed to be doing. And again, sometimes you have to just reward teams doing what they were supposed to be doing. St. Francis of Illinois is a perfect example. They didn't have too many ranked games on their schedule, but they got number 16 in the country by being just boring and winning games you're supposed to win and doing it in dominant fashion, if we're being honest here. Huntington, interesting team because I still think they fall, but beating Taylor has cushioned the fall a little bit and has kept them higher than I think they were going to. If they lost to Taylor, I think you're looking at them maybe from 20 down to 20, very close to 25. I really do believe that. But that win, I think, stopped it from being a free fall and now just a couple steps on a staircase. So that's why you got to close out these games, especially when you have them in the crossroads. You're going to be able to really bounce back from some of these wins, from some of these losses that you do have. So I do think that win by Huntington against Taylor really helped the Foresters stay above, at least 2 spots above 25. All right, I could see them falling 22, 21, but nothing lower than that. Oregon Tech, they're playing 500 ball right now in their last 6 games, 3-3. But the bigger issue is the 3 losses were games that I think they needed to win to move up. You lost to Eastern Oregon, College of Idaho, and Corbin. Right, the LC State game should have helped, but now you're asking that game to, and it wasn't even a dominant win. You're asking that game to do a little bit too much, in my opinion. I think if you beat LC State and then you beat one of Eastern Oregon, College of Idaho, and Corbin, I'm more willing to say still at number 20, tied with Huntington, or maybe you can go up a spot with Huntington dropping down. But because of that, I think that they are in jeopardy of getting to that bubble of dropping out. MACU may drop out, going 2-1 with their loss being the receiving votes USAO. I think the Mid-America Christian just hasn't done enough to stay in the top 25, already being number 23, and you were just outside of it the 2 polls ago now. Carroll went 4-2 in their last 6 games, winning against Dakota State. It was a big win, and I think the William Carey loss should not really factor into anything. It's the Rochester Christian loss that I think, while people might look at it as a bad loss, I don't think people should. Obviously, Rochester Christian has made it a season out of being upset specialists. They now have Carroll and Indiana Tech on their resume. So I don't think it's more, and they're one of the top teams in the WAC. So I don't think it's a situation where that's a bad loss. I think that's just a situation where you got, and that team clearly has gotten a few teams already. They may get some more as the season goes on. So I don't think those 2 losses should hurt them that much. So now I'm looking more of like 4 wins, including that win over Dakota State. That should keep you pretty safe above water. I think get you up to that, closer to that top 20 when it's all said and done. For Georgetown, they're going to be – I like the Tigers. I really do. But I don't know where to put them out right now, to be honest with you guys. I could see them staying at number 25. I could also see them dropping out of the top 25. We'll see. The problem with Georgetown is not so much them. It's also the fact that there are some teams that are going to move into the top 25 these polls. If not, I will riot. Because – and we'll start right here. We'll go right into it with the receiving votes teams. In order from, I don't have numbered, but the most receiving votes to the least receiving votes as of the last polls. William Carey, Southeastern, Columbia, Evangel, Southern Oregon, Indiana Wesleyan, Friends, Hastings, Loyola, Eastern Oregon. And then Taylor, Lindsey Wilson, Grandview, Shawnee State, MSU Northern, St. Xavier, Providence, USAO, Lourdes, and LSU Shreveport. Right? William Carey, and I need people to understand this. William Carey needs to be in the top 25. They shouldn't be. They couldn't. It's not that they should be. It's not that they could be. They better be in the top 25. This is the last undefeated team in the country. They've had a very, very good schedule. Has it been easy? At times, sure, but whose schedule hasn't? They have handled business. They're the top team in the southern states. They need to give me 25. And that's why, if I'm being honest, just those 2 teams, I take William Carey over Georgetown. Simple as that. Simple as that. One of the last 2 undefeated teams in the country. You've had very good wins over some really good opponents. William Carey needs to be in it. They need to be in it. Done deal. Evangel, now they should be in the top 25. They should be in the top 25. 12-game winning streak, one of the top 5 offenses in the country. I don't know how many more things they need to check off the list. What hurts them, the KCAC, aside from themselves and Friends, not too many games that they can really help their resume. They kind of more banking on teams getting upset, which has happened. So I could see them being on the 23, 24, 25 bubble, and we'll see if that continues. Columbia had a case. They had a case of being top 25. It was airtight. I really couldn't poke holes into it. I was going to be on here saying, they should be in the top 25 as well. But then you lost to Friends 4 games ago now. At least a really high receiving votes team. Could they sneak into the top 25? That'd be a heck of a sneak. Someone opened the back door and let those Cougars get in there. And I'm not saying they don't deserve it, but it isn't as airtight as it was in the past. I think they had a better case before that Friends loss than they do now, but we'll see what the community goes with. For Southeastern, I think they will drop a little bit, especially just off the fact that they got upset, and I say upset loosely, against Kaiser a few days ago now. Oh, last week when the polls come out, a couple days ago now for everybody else. Obviously, it was just one of those games, and I said it on game day with the KCAC. Kaiser's had a really good shooting night. They went 45 and 17 in the second and third quarter combined in the scoring margins. So clearly that's where the game was won and lost. And aside from that, the other 2 quarters were not anything crazy. Like the fourth quarter was 9-5 in favor of Southeastern. Like it was the very low scoring game aside from that second quarter, and it was specifically Kaiser that was lighting up the nets. So, but it is still considered an upset. So Southeastern, I do think will drop a little bit in the receiving votes picture, but they still should be receiving votes in these polls. For Southern Oregon, another team I think should be in the top 25. To be honest with y'all, you're 4-2 in your last 6 games before Saturday. I would have said could not, because they only had one good win, and that was over Corbin. And then they lost to LC State and College of Idaho. But then you beat Eastern Oregon, which we'll get to in a moment here. That game's got to weigh something. I mean, the Mountaineers were they were going to be one of the top 3 one of the 3 teams left undefeated if they got out of that game. There was so much that was possibly going to happen out of that. But the Red Raiders did not let it happen. So you got to understand, if you're Southern Oregon, like that's a big win. That's a big win, and I think they should be rewarded for that. That's why I'm saying should be. I don't think it'll happen per se, but they could be up there kind of taking, if Evangelo and William Carey get into the top 25, I think you're looking at a Columbia and Southern Oregon being the top teams in the receiving votes side of it. Now, they do play Oregon Tech. That's going to be on Tuesday, though, so it will not count towards these polls. I just want to let everybody know that now. If you have a game on Tuesday, that game will not count towards these polls. It'll be for the next polls. All right? As much as it's weird to say, I think they're staring at the barrel of being unranked, y'all. I really do. I mean, you lost to Spring Arbor, not a bad loss, but then you lost to Grace. Nothing against Grace. That Grace team, they earned that one. And I think what really puts the nail in the coffin of possibly being unranked, which is, again, a very far fall in my opinion. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but they're staring at the barrel if they don't get some of these wins lined up here. The problem is that they're both at home. And up until recently, Indiana Wesleyan was undefeated at home. They were one of the best. It was a noticeable difference between the Wildcats on the road and at home, right? But now it clearly has maybe. And whenever this happens, when you have a team that plays 2 different ways, honestly, home and road, one's got to give. Either the road woes that clearly have been plaguing this team will catch up to you at home, or the home wins will start seeping into the road and be able to get some of these wins in a row. It looks like and feels like the woes are getting onto the home court. We'll see if that kind of gets nipped in the bud early, but I do think Indiana Wesleyan's in trouble of missing out on the postseason even, and definitely staring at the barrel of being unranked. For Taylor and Hastings, I think they're going to drop in the receiving votes picture because they just had some key losses. I mean, I do think Taylor is more likely to drop than Hastings after going 1-3 in their 4 ranked games, that being Indiana Tech, Marion, St. Francis, and Huntington. They went 1-3 in those games. The win being Indiana Tech does help, but I think you need that Huntington game. My prediction was to be 2-2 because of that Huntington game. I wasn't surprised they couldn't get Marion or St. Francis, but I think it was an upset, believe it or not, with Huntington beating Taylor. Nothing against Huntington, but I do think Taylor was the better team. It is the better team as of right now. We'll see if that changes as the playoffs get closer, but I think Taylor is in more jeopardy of falling than Hastings. For Hastings, it was more of just another situation. You haven't really done too much, in my opinion. You have some losses, not too many great wins, so we'll see how that kind of plays out. Loyola, they're looking safe, even though they suffered their second loss of the season in the last few games. But with it being William Carey, how much can that really hurt? How much can that really hurt you? So I think Loyola's fine. Eastern Oregon and France are in the same boat, but on different ends of the boat. So for Eastern Oregon, they were staring at a top 25 seed. I really do believe that. But after dropping Southern Oregon, it just becomes a top receiving votes spot. Could they sneak in? I highly doubt that. I really don't think so. Not yet. They need a couple more wins lined up in the Cascade before they can do that. Specifically, if they can get that Southern Oregon game back, now we're in business. For Friends, they weren't staying at the top 25. They were staying in the receiving votes picture, maybe falling a little bit lower. But then you beat Columbia to hand them the first loss on the road. Now I'm saying top 25 now? No. But maybe. My answer is no. But there is a world where it can matriculate into that, especially with Evangel still being on their schedule lined up in a couple weeks here. So just want to throw that out there for Friends. Grandview, Shawnee State, they may both fall, but Grandview is more in jeopardy because they lost their first conference game of the season to Missouri Valley. Against Missouri Valley, but obviously that's a pretty big loss for a lot of different reasons that we'll get to in a few seconds here. For the Bears, their only loss to the Rio Grande, so it's an understandable loss. Nothing against them. Still think you got to punish. Yeah, like I always say, you got to punish losing, but not every loss is the same. Grandview losing to Missouri Valley is worse than Rio Grande at home losing beating Shawnee State. So that's kind of that's where I feel with that. For Lindsey Wilson, you're looking at 2-1 with their loss being the Campbellsville. I mean, I see them staying put. Nothing crazy in my opinion when saying with that.
Schedule out and my laundry schedule out. Because now I was just sitting here and you talked about the water schedule and stuff like that. So I don't have to send it out. We have practice tomorrow.
You're welcome.
And I thought about it when JC sent his message. Like you asked me, but then when JC sent his message out, it kind of like actually hit. Like damn, I actually do need to send out the water schedule because we do have practice tomorrow.
Going back to it. But yeah, that's how I see it for Lindsey Wilson. Now, MSU Northern and Providence, it's not looking good at staying in the receiving votes picture, if I'm being honest. When we're looking at but that's what it is for Lindsey Wilson. For MSU Northern and Providence, I don't think it's looking good, if I'm being honest with you guys, because you're looking at a situation for MSU Northern, pretty safe with their only loss being the Montana Tech, but you're already towards the bottom of the receiving votes picture, and we know how the committee can be when you're on that bubble, so we'll see what happens there. Providence, though, I think they're also staring at the barrel of being unranked after losing to Montana Tech. Not bad, but Montana Western. Nothing against Montana Western. The Bulldogs, great win. But you're also an unranked team. You got to be penalized a little bit for it, so we'll see if Providence can hold on to it, because we're talking about Providence they were one of the last 4 teams in receiving votes. It was them, USAO, Lourdes, and LSU Shreveport. I do think 2 of those teams will be moving up in the receiving votes picture, so we'll see what happens with Providence. St. Xavier, losing to Cumberland to Tennessee, that'll hurt their stock a little bit. I think those 3 teams, MSU Northern, more so St. Xavier and Providence, y'all are in jeopardy, specifically of getting overtaken by USAO and by LSU Shreveport. They've been boring in the best way. Again, 9-0 combined, all games, double-digit victories, so I think they should move up closer off that line of being unranked. For Lourdes, though, you went 3-4 in your last 7 games, including losses to Indiana Tech, Berisa, Georgetown, and one that really pushes them out, in my opinion, Cleary, because Cleary being in your conference and being the reason you might not get a top 3 seed, tough. So I do think Lourdes will be in jeopardy of getting out. I think they will drop out of the receiving votes picture, actually, in my opinion. 2 teams that I think need to be in receiving votes picture. UT Southern, maybe the hottest team in the country right now. I said it. They may be the hottest team in the country right now. And then College of Idaho, who I think has been finally getting into a groove in the Cascade and has clearly, and we'll talk about that in a moment here, entered the chat in certain aspects. But that's going to do it for the prediction part of things. Now we're going to hit on a seismic Saturday. When I say seismic, I mean pretty important. Obviously, we'll start with the shocker of the week. It was IU South Bend versus St. Francis of Illinois. Another game where the first quarter was really the deciding factor. I mean, it turned into an uphill battle for the ranked team, and it's not the only one of the day. 20-8 for IU South Bend in that first quarter. I think St. Francis ended up playing good aside from that first quart. IU South Bend was just a better team for the full 40 minutes. That's what happened. I've said it in previous episodes. You know, St. Francis, they are the better team. It's not a hot take to say that. But for 40 minutes on Saturday, they were not the better team, and that's what ended up happening in this one. They shot 41% from the field. They had 8 paint points. 4 players were in double figures. 2 of them had double-doubles. The starters for IU South Bend, though, they dominated. 61 points. St. Francis starters, 3 of them had over 10 points. 3 of them had over 10 points, but the starters specifically had 40 points. So it was all, those numbers I read out, all IU South Bend. The starters dominated for the full 40. Like I said, 61 points for them. It was just their night. Tip your hats off to them. Really big win for conference sake. You definitely threw a wrench in the plans of St. Francis. We'll see how St. Francis bounces back in conference play. Obviously, these two teams will play, I believe, one more time. I don't think that we've hit the second round of conference play just yet in the Chicagoland. That's a really big win and easily the shocker of the week for me. Now we'll head over to St. Francis versus Marion. I think the Cougars are about to cash in pretty big, y'all. They're about to cash in pretty big. They have lined themselves up with something very impressive, and I'll get to it in a moment here. But this was the other game where the first quarter was the deciding factor. 20-9 in the first quarter for St. Francis over Marion. Callie Gregory and Rena Sheetwarman, they do what they do. 31 points, double-double for Callie with 13 rebounds, a near double-double for Rena with 9 rebounds. But it was Taylor Fordance with their second double-figure scoring game in 3 games with 14 points that I think kind of pushed the Cougars over, in my opinion, and gave them that third source of offense. Because against Marion, you need to have really good offense across the board with the defense that they possess and they were able to put out on the court the entire game. So if you're able to get your best players, got to have what they normally get, which obviously happened with Callie and Rena. But if you're able to get a Taylor to chip in an extra 14 points, those are the players that are really going to sway you in a game like this against a team like Marion. The Cougars defense also held Abby McNally from the Knights to 14 points, and the only Knights player to have over 10 points. So clearly, the Cougars, their defense ability on display, maybe they were the better defensive team that night. I think that's really what it comes down to. When you play the Knights, obviously we've talked about their offense, but it's their defense that is their calling card. And when you hold Marion to 25.4% from the field, including 15% from the three-point line, both of them are season lows, the offense clearly couldn't get going. And as much as, when you're a defensive team, you don't want to focus too much on offense, the only way you can set up your defense, whether it's pressing, whether it's zone, even a man-to-man, the only way you can set it up is to score buckets. And if you're not scoring, all you're doing is giving offensive transition points opportunities to the other team, especially if you're shooting 15% from the three-point line. I don't have the numbers in front of me of how many attempts Marion took, but safe to say it was a pretty good number of attempts. And even if it was a low number, you clearly didn't make enough of them. So even if there were just 10 shots, you didn't make a good enough clip to be able to keep them away from transition opportunities, keep them away from getting players going in the open court. And I think that's what also hurt Marion in this one. Really big one by St. Francis. If they win their next game, which I'm blanking on it, but I know it's a ranked game, might be Huntington. If they win that game, they would have had a very impressive little 3-game stretch here between beating Marion, beating Taylor, now you beat Huntington. I'm still going Marion, being the team to be in the crossroads, but you do that, St. Francis is officially the number 2 team in the country, in my opinion, in terms of power rankings, in terms of where they're at, all that kind of stuff. I would go St. Francis number 2. I still go Taylor, Spring Arbor number 4, and I think Huntington is number 5 right now. Now we're going to jump over to the Cascade with the game that I mentioned earlier. College of Idaho, they've joined the chat. They've entered the chat. They are now a serious player in the Cascade, in my opinion. I needed to wait and see, but I've seen enough, and I think even in some of their losses, they have done very well. They have done very, very well. The Yotes, great defensive win. Aside from Tatum Schmarback and Josie Ramos for the Owls, no one else had over 10 points. They forced the Owls into 18 turnovers. Meanwhile, on offense, they had all but one player score, and 7 of the ladies had at least 5 points. So it was a complete team effort, complete offensive just display from where everybody's touching the ball, everybody's getting involved, everybody's contributing one way or another. You love to see those type of wins. And again, beating a Marion, beating an Oregon Tech even, those are teams that you need to be able to have complete games on both sides of the ball, but especially on offense. If you're able to get multiple people involved, not everybody's going to have 20. Not everybody's going to even have over 10. But if you're able to get a lot of, like I mentioned, 7 players had at least 5 points. If you do that, do the math, was about 35 points, something like that. That's a good number to have. And then you're going to have your best players do what they need to do. They'll give you those 11, 12, 15, whatever the case is. And even them, they go lower than their averages, but it's done the right way, right? If people are scoring, I don't need you to go out and give me 20. You can go out and give me 15, give me 14. That's going to be fine. Because now you're less responsible for things on offense. You're able to do more on defense. You're able to do a lot of. It just helps. So if you're able to have a complete team contribution on offense, it sets a tone for the rest of the game, in my opinion. Now we jump for the Yotes. I do want to shout out the leader in points, Anna Mooney, 16 points. She made a living at the line. 16 points. She was 2 of 4 from the field. Girl had 11 free throw makes on 12 attempts. Couldn't miss from the line, so definitely want to give her flowers for that one. Staying in the Cascade, LC State beats Corbin. A statement win for LC State. They stay in the chat, in my opinion. It's been kind of well documented. I have had my reserves with LC State throughout the year, some tough losses on the road and neutral sites, whatever the case is. But this is a big win. This is a big win, and I mentioned before for Corbin, they've kind of hit that first wall. They were hot to start the season, one of the best team in the Cascade, in my opinion, up there with Eastern Oregon. But now they have fallen off and a little bit of a slide here. LC State, it was an offensive masterclass with a capital M. All 4 quarters were above 20 points for the Warriors. Meanwhile, for Corbin, only 1 quarter was above 20 points. And that was a 30-point quarter, but it ain't matter if you've given up 20 plus in all 4 quarters. 5 players were in double figure scoring, and Sita Bryard had a high of 26 and 11 rebounds for LC State. For Corbin, they played pretty well, to be honest. I don't think they had a bad game, pretty average. I believe the quarter scoring broken up, it was over 10 points per for the other 3 quarters. I want to say it was around like 15, 17, 14, something in those 3 numbers, and then 32 was the third quarter for them. So those averages, they put up 77 points. If I remember correctly, 77 points. It wasn't like they had a bad night shooting the ball, but LC State just had a better night, and that's what happens sometimes. So you got to give them credit for that. For Corbin, though, they had 4 players in double figure scoring. Their own 20-point player was Jersey Eruta with 21, plus their own double lady was Emilia Bishop with 11 and 13 rebounds. So again, they played well. I think they could. I don't even go as far as say they played great. LC State just played amazing. And it sucks to say that, but sometimes you just get outplayed on certain nights, and you got to tip your cats off to the better team for that full 40 minutes. Last game we'll touch on, staying in the Cascade. Again, it was a very Cascade-driven day in terms of upsets, and not even upsets, but just losses for the teams at the top of the conference with teams that are also in the top of the conference. Southern Oregon obviously beating Eastern Oregon. Massive win for Southern Oregon. I think it rights the ship a little bit. They were in jeopardy, in my opinion, of maybe sliding a little bit here. It was not the game I thought would help them get back into the swing of things, but the game that will help them get back in the swing of things. A great defensive performance for Southern Oregon. They held Eastern Oregon to 29.4% shooting from the field, 19% from the 3-point line. Only 2 players were with 10 or more points, and not even a Kelsey Sanger double-double was enough to help compensate for things for Eastern Oregon. For Southern Oregon, 4 players scored 10 or more points. 3 of them came from the starting lineup. I think the player that really pushed it over, though, for Southern Oregon, Lydia Traore. She was not in the books for a 12-point performance. Not because she can't do it. She's had multiple double-figure scoring games throughout the season, I believe over 4 or 5. But this was her first game over 10 points at 12. It snapped a 3-game streak of under 10 points, and it's the first time since November 24th when she had 12 points. That was the last time she had that mark. It was just a game where, again, you play against these top teams. If you're going to have your best players do what they do, you're going to have your starting lineup even do what they do. Like I mentioned, 3 of the 5 starters had 10-plus points. But you need someone off the bench to come in and contribute, even if it's for a spurt. That spurt can be what you need. I know people in the league, in the NBA, in the WNBA, they say all the time, role players win series. You know what I'm saying? Your superstars are supposed to get you a game or two. They could even give you 3 games. But there's got to be a game where they aren't getting calls. They're not getting the buckets. They're not getting the touches. They're not getting whatever the reason is. How do the role players and the glue players and the players that, they know they're not going to get that many touches every night, but this night they were ready. They were ready for the extra touches. They were ready for the extra shot attempts. That's what separates a lot of these games from upsets and the better team, the higher ranked team being able to come out with the victory. Really big win for Southern Oregon. I think it really has solidified the race up there where I'm keeping Corbin in there. They've fallen off a little bit in the power rankings for me for the Cascade, but I'm keeping Corbin in there. Eastern Oregon, obviously. Southern Oregon. I'm throwing in College of Idaho for sure. Eastern Oregon, Oregon Tech, that's 5 teams right there that I've talked on in the Cascade. It's going to be a bloodbath in the Cascade, if I'm being honest with you. They're the reason I want to stay up late and try and catch some of these games because I need to see some of these games live. I do. Some other notes here, some of the housekeeping things before we send you guys into the week. I mentioned before, UC Southern, hottest team in the country right now. I'll let you be the judge of that, but I just want to throw out into the ether. They're the hottest team in the country right now for me. We'll see what happens. It'll probably die off a little bit. Now, the real question is, can they turn that into some success in the Southern states? We will see. But UC Southern, keep an eye on them for receiving votes in the next few days. Milligan, the last one standing in the AAC after beating Bryan for the sole possession of the number 1 seed. New year, same team. Last year Milligan obviously was a co-regular season champions with Johnson. They now hold on to the number 1 seed by themselves. Can the Buffs hold on to it for the rest of the season? We will see. There's still one more game left with Bryan. You still got a few other games, the Pikevilles and Johnsons of the world, I believe. So, but I know that Bryan game is one more left, and I'm pretty sure it's at Bryan. But I could be wrong about that. If it's not at Bryan, Milligan is in the driver's seat, 10-12, clear road in front of them. But if it's going to be at Bryan, 10-12, not necessarily clear, a couple cars, a little bit of traffic, but Milligan is definitely the last one standing and the hottest team right now in the AAC. Mentioned a little bit earlier, Missouri Valley. No one will be perfect in the heart because of the Vikings after beating Grandview. The reason this sets up some interesting things. If I'm a Grandview fan, I need Mid-American Nazarene to drop another one because now you've put a lot of pressure in that game because. And I'm not saying that I know this. I can get confirmation about it in a few days here, but I do not know it for sure. Which is a pretty safe assumption to make, if you finish tied. So, for example, Grandview and Mid-American Nazarene still have one more game to play with each other. If Grandview were to lose that game, you now have 2 losses on the season. Mid-American Nazarene would have 1 loss. If they drop another one, we'll see. It would have 2 losses, excuse me. What Grandview needs to not happen is a tiebreaker with Mid-American Nazarene. If you do not win that game against Mid-American Nazarene, you're in jeopardy of having a tiebreaker situation between yourselves and Mid-American. If you do win that one, you're still in the driver's seat. You're still the number 1 seed. We're still able to figure out. You're still able to host and all that kind of stuff. But that game now for Mid-American Nazarene, the intensity and the pressure of that one for both teams has now elevated a little bit because of this Missouri Valley win. Shout out to Missouri Valley. Very impressive win. Big time for sure. Definitely throws a wrench in the plan for the Heart teams. College of Ozarks beats Nelson, who was number 1 in the conference. The SAC is just in limbo, y'all. It's a matter of who's hot when and not a matter of who's going to stay hot, if I'm being honest with you guys. I think you got to peak at the right time. Nelson was the early peak. I still think they're going to be a player in the SAC. Don't get me wrong, but it was definitely an interesting loss for them. For College of Ozarks, I'm not surprised. They're a really good team. They're really well-versed. They play a certain style, and they know what they want to do. Obviously, I got to see them up close personal. They're going to be a real player in the SAC for sure. I think they're another team, and I've said a few teams like this throughout the country, throughout the season. They benefit from being overlooked. They're going to always be overlooked in the SAC when you've got Nelson, you've got USAO, you've got Langston. I'm missing somebody there, but you've got a lot of teams. You got 4 teams, I believe, above them. I don't know if College of Ozarks might be the 4th team, but you at least have 3 teams over you. So there's a lot of teams that you can argue are better picks, safer picks for the SAC championship. College of Ozarks, that benefits them because now they're getting overlooked and not given the respect that I think they deserve. So we'll see what happens for the Bobcats of Ozarks. Grace beating IWU. Like I mentioned earlier, IWU's in jeopardy of missing the playoffs. You got to kind of string together some of these wins here. You have to because you still have to play Grace at Grace. You still got to do your second round with all these ranked teams in the crossroads. Things are not looking great for IWU. They can still do it, but I think their mindset has kind of changed now from being a team that, we just got to get in the playoffs because we'll pull off an upset to we got to just get in the playoffs. Like, I don't care what seed we in. We just want to get in the playoffs. It'd be so weird for me to look up in February and say the Wildcats are not in the Crossroads Championship or Crossroads Conference Tournament. I didn't think I would be saying that at the beginning of the year, but hey, here we are in January. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it, Iwu? And then obviously staying in the Crossroads, Huntington beating Taylor, like I mentioned earlier, I think it's a big win for Huntington because I do think it gives them a little more stability. I still would have them maybe 5th or 4th in the conference, like I said earlier, but it is a nice win, and I do think it kind of rights the ship a little bit for Huntington, who's had an up and down season, had some great wins, had some tough losses, but it shows that they are going to be a player in the Crossroads for sure. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Hoop Report. I hope you guys have enjoyed the content the past few weeks. You guys really seem to like the Scouting Report, the magazine that we have started to put out. Obviously, we put out another one this morning, so make sure you guys go like on that one and just kind of get a quick recap of the entire country and for the past few days and over the weekend. Schedule has officially changed. We will not be doing any more Thursday episodes. It'll now be Friday and Monday. So we'll stick with our Monday episodes, but now you guys have to wait until the end of the week on Fridays because we do have conference games on Wednesdays. So it gives me a little more time to be able to record, get my information together, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to try and get a coaching interview lined up for Friday. Don't make any promises, but I do have someone in mind, and now we'll start dropping hints as that does get closer. Maybe it's going to be in the Scouting Report. We'll see. But like I said, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. Appreciate y'all, and we'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.